I'd love to know first, like what you've learned about yourself now that you're a mom, but then the follow-up question would be, what have you learned about relationships, like romantically as becoming parents?
So the first question is, what have I learned about myself?
Yeah,
I
everything.
think that I know literally everything. And what's so cool about motherhood is it's a continual journey because your child, whatever stage they are in, will most likely, I'm not saying this for everyone, but what I've noticed within myself and other people, it will project whatever you haven't seen within yourself. And so, what I mean by that is, for example, the newborn stage is a lot about feeding and a lot about, survival and caretaking and sleep and stuff. And a lot of our own insecurities around food or, how much is our baby eating? Or why aren't they weighing this much? Can almost sometimes be reflected in terms of how we feel about our own self. Right. Or even
Mm,
how we were nurtured as kids, which is really interesting because I think that that goes after kind of the nonverbal piece that a lot of us have kind of these unconscious nonverbal wounds that we can't really express. We're like, it's in my body. I don't know how to express it, but they're really, from the nonverbal stages where we were newborns. And a lot of that can, be projected onto our child as well. And it's not in any way to say, okay, now that it's being projected, we must do the work and fix that, but just to more so bring about the awareness that that's okay, that it may come up and recognize again that wow, okay, maybe I didn't get this care and this attention when I was young, and kind of tending to those pieces as we tend to our child. So, with that being said, every stage is interesting. Like my child right now, he's 2. He's in a tantrum stage. I notice I'm okay more with his sadness, or if there's like something that's connected to, for example, like if he's upset about maybe not being able to get a cup, I am more understanding of that than just regular irritation. So regular irritation, I struggle with it more because I think I struggle that within myself, right? Like it's a
mm,
sense, if I have a reason for something, it's easier for me to work with it. And I think that's for a
mm.
lot of us because there's a sense of certainty, there's a sense of control. It's like, oh, I know what I'm irritated at. Versus if my son is irritated at something and I don't know, I have to, really work with that within myself and be like, okay, but it's still okay if he's irritated and I don't need to know why. He doesn't need to know why either,
Yeah.
So I think that ever stage is evolving and it's interesting also, again, the societal expectations of seeing even, my friends around me and how they treat their children in terms of their own projection. So I think that's been interesting. Like
Mm.
every stage is different and it brings up beauty and it also brings up the thorns, the challenges.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's been really interesting. I actually realize within myself, this might be really interesting for me to say, but I realize how very selfish I am,
Mm.
actually. And I think that motherhood, and I think that our society reinforces a sense of selfishness. I actually really do believe that. But I think that motherhood says, even if I'm feeling a certain way, this doesn't mean to neglect our needs, right? Or to neglect ourselves or like put ourselves down. But even if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm going to extend out to my baby right now and give them love, even if there's a part within myself that's like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here. I don't want to be at this park for like the 50th time. And I
Mm.
really think that um, it forces you to really kind of take a step away from yourself into a sacrifice of love. And I
Mm.
think that we can talk about that in marriage in terms of relationship. I think it's similar. I think that there's different periods within a partnership where there is a sacrifice that's required. I think there's an extra sacrifice when someone has ROCD because it's almost like, I really don't want to do this. I actually have to go into exposure. Everything within me is screaming, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm going to extend my hand to love. Right. And I think
Mm.
it's very similar with motherhood as well. So I think it's forced me to really be more compassionate, more understanding, more empathetic. I think it's forced me to um, come out of my own bubble in terms of my selfish ways. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't see selfishness as like, bad or good or anything like that. It just is. And I think that it's allowed me to, yeah, to interestingly, as I step into more of that sacrifice, I've actually felt more deeper love, which is
Mm.
really interesting, right? Because I think our society tends to be like me, what I want, what I want, what I want, what I want, what I desire, my needs. I need to have this all the time. And I don't think that as a society we're meant to be consumed so much with ourselves. So I think motherhood allows us to step outside ourselves a bit more into love.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love that. It's kind of like I don't know if it's a trend or just like a sentiment that's going around. Maybe you've heard on social media where people are like, everyone wants a village, but they're not a villager or something. Like, we all want just to like have this rich community, but then we don't think about how can I contribute to this community. And of course, not everybody. Like, I think most people try to be generous and try to reach out and, continue with friendships and family relationships. But I think that we've lost some of that with the individualistic,
absolutely.
even what you were saying earlier, the self-healing, self-help. It's like all very
Absolutely.
self-focused.
It's so self-focused. And I think that that's why a lot of people with RCD and even in relationships get confused because they're like, wait, it's getting hard. I thought this was supposed to be easy, in terms of why is my relationship kind of pushing back on certain things within my relationship, but why there's things within myself that I'm feeling resistance on. And I think that that's why our culture is so quick in terms of like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, because we've become so, well, things should be easy, things should be quick. And when things are hard, that must mean something is wrong. Obviously, as I'm talking about, there's always the exception. I'm never saying for every single person, but it's interesting to see this as a culture. I think that this is praised on in some way. But I love that you brought that example up about like everyone wants a village, but no one wants to be a villager. It takes that commitment, takes that work, right, to have what we are wanting to have. And I see that with motherhood and partnership as well.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing kind of the analogy about how at every stage you're getting that mirror back to you of maybe, things about yourself. It makes sense. And that definitely makes me think about how it is an ongoing journey and the lessons about yourself will come at many ages, which is really cool. And then as far as your romantic relationship, how have things been going? I know that bringing a child into the world, or I imagine, and from what I've seen, it adds this extra nuance. And there's, now you're starting to input, like, what do I think as far as how they should be raised and all these different things. So, what have you learned in your marriage now that you're a parent?
Postpartum is definitely hard. I mean, you're not sleeping. Your hormones are raging. You're disagreeing on, at least my experience. I just want to normalize this for people. You're disagreeing on so many different things. You're disagreeing maybe on the way that one is parenting. There's a lot of stuff coming up in terms of, balancing the household. If your partner's working and you're not, and you might be missing work and your partner is, not, and all of these complexities. So I think in the beginning and postpartum, yeah, we definitely struggled. Yeah, we definitely struggled. At least the first 6 months, I would say, were really hard. I also experienced some postpartum depression for some time. It was really hard in terms of my hormones. I definitely had this sense of like in the beginning, I can do it myself. I don't need anyone. And then I was like, oh wait, I do need people. And it was this is kind of that struggle. And the lack of sleep really makes you feel as though you're against each other completely. It's definitely a war zone in that way. At least for us, it was definitely a war zone. But I do believe that in turn now actually our relationship is the best it's ever been ever in our whole life, and I'm so grateful for that. I think that you're going to need to go through challenges within a partnership. I think we all know that, but it's important to just normalize that, going through different challenges, maybe like in 6 months, my husband and I will go through a hard time if our son isn't sleeping or, something happened within our partnership that is causing friction because of parenthood or other type of stuff or relational stuff. But overall, right now, we're in a beautiful, beautiful place. And I'm so very grateful for that. And I think it's important to note that we're in a beautiful place doesn't mean that before postpartum wasn't like hell at different times, and before that we were at a
Yeah.
beautiful place. So it's just important to kind of be able to hold the space so for so many different things